He opened the wrong door and stepped into the one moment that would change his life. Julian Hart, billionaire tech CEO, wasn't supposed to end up in her hotel room. But one tipsy mistake, one half-open door, and one woman in a bikini later, he's staring down Sierra Langston, the infamous heartbreaker heiress with a reputation as untouchable as it is irresistible. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The glass doors of the Hilton Grand Summit slid open with a quiet hiss, welcoming the warm Nevada night into the marble-floored lobby. Inside, the chandelier lights flickered against polished surfaces, catching the shimmer of cufflinks, sequin dresses, and the soft clinks of whiskey glasses being raised in celebration. The final evening of the International Business Summit was wrapping up, and most guests were either retreating to their rooms or spilling into limousines bound for after-parties. Julian Hart, the billionaire CEO of Hart Tech Innovations, had chosen to retire for the evening. Not because he was tired, though the weight of jet lag pressed into his spine, but because he preferred solitude over schmoozing. He had played the role of charming keynote speaker, grinned through interviews, toasted with people he barely knew, and danced dangerously close to meaningless conversations filled with shallow compliments and empty ambitions. The whiskey, though, that had been real. Smoky, expensive, and generously poured by a Hungarian investor with a gold tooth and too much cologne. As Julian stepped off the elevator onto the 23rd floor, he exhaled, loosening his tie. His mind buzzed, not just from the alcohol, but from the overload of names, faces, and forced laughter. He glanced at the key card in his hand, 2309, but didn't really see it. His feet moved on autopilot as he turned left down the hallway. Muted footsteps echoed on the carpet. He stopped in front of 2310. Unaware of the mistake, he slid the card into the reader. Beep. The light blinked green. Julian paused. That was odd. The door hadn't been shut all the way, only nudged into the frame. Still, he chalked it up to hotel oversight or faulty door latches. His thoughts were already drifting to a warm shower and the silence of a private suite. He stepped inside. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of a bedside lamp and the soft ambient light filtering through drawn curtains. The hum of air conditioning whispered in the background. The scent of fresh lavender and pool chlorine clung to the air. Then he saw her. She was standing near the bed, frozen mid-step, wearing nothing but a sapphire blue bikini, water still glistening on her skin. Her long legs were bare, toned, and damp, and her dark hair was pulled up into a messy bun with loose curls escaping around her face. A hotel towel was draped loosely over one arm, as if she'd just come in from the pool moments before. Her eyes locked onto his. Wide. Startled. There was a beat of silence, so tense it could have snapped in half. Julian blinked, his brain lagging behind his eyes. For a second, he wondered if this was some luxurious hallucination conjured by the whiskey, or maybe some elite hotel's idea of next-level hospitality. But no, this was real. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, though she didn't scream. She didn't move. Neither did he. "What the hell are you doing in my room?" she asked finally, voice calm but steely. Julian's eyes widened as the fog cleared. "Wait, this isn't 2309. Her eyebrow arched sharply. "No, it's 2310. My room. You're trespassing." He stepped back immediately, holding his hands up, half laughing at himself. "Oh my God. I'm so sorry. I must have misread the damn key card. I thought the door was mine." It opened. It was unlocked. "I went to get ice," she replied, folding her arms over her chest instinctively, though it did little to conceal her. "You should probably leave before I scream." "Yes. Right. Of course," he said quickly, already halfway to the door. "I really am sorry. Honest mistake." He backed out into the hallway, the door clicking shut behind him. Only when it closed did he let out a breath, his heart thumping, not from fear, but from sheer embarrassment, and something else. That woman. Her presence had struck him like lightning. Not just her body, though yes, it had been impossible to ignore, but the power in her posture, the sharpness of her voice, the way she didn't flinch. He turned to face the room across the hall. 2309, his actual suite. Chuckling under his breath, he shook his head, slid the card into the right door this time, and entered. As the door shut behind him, he leaned back against it, eyes closed for a long moment. What the hell just happened? And somewhere across the hallway, a woman stood by her bed, towel now clutched to her chest, staring at the door that had just closed behind a man she didn't recognize, but would not forget. Not anytime soon. Morning broke with a slow golden glow spilling between the curtains of Julian's suite. The sunlight played across the minimalist furnishings, sleek gray upholstery, chrome accents, and untouched fruit baskets resting on the credenza. Somewhere in the room, his phone buzzed, followed by a knock on the door. Julian sat upright on the edge of the bed, still shirtless, his hair tousled from restless sleep. He hadn't been able to get her out of his mind. The woman in 2310. She had been something else. Not just beautiful, but electric. Her presence had lingered with him all night like a ghost. The awkwardness of the wrong room incident should have faded by now, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw the moment again. Her eyes, her posture, the confidence behind her annoyance. He threw on a black t-shirt and opened the door. Eli, his personal assistant, stood there in a perfectly pressed blazer, holding 2 coffees and a tablet under his arm. "You look like hell," Eli said flatly, walking in. "I feel like it," Julian muttered, rubbing his temple. "I walked into the wrong hotel room last night." Eli froze mid-sip. "Wait, what?" "I was tired. And buzzed. I misread the card. Walked into 2310 instead of 2309. He grabbed a coffee and flopped back onto the couch. She was just coming back from the pool, wearing nothing but a bikini. I nearly got myself arrested. Eli blinked. Only you could stumble into a scene like that and survive it. She didn't scream, just glared at me, like I was some kind of idiot. "Well," Eli deadpanned, "you were." Julian cracked a small smile. "Fair." Eli swiped open his tablet and started scrolling through Julian's itinerary. "So, mystery woman. Did you catch a name, or were you too focused on her surroundings?" "No name," Julian said, stretching. "But she had this look. Fierce. She wasn't afraid of me, not even a little. It was like I walked into a lioness's den." Eli made a face. "You're not about to romanticize breaking and entering, are you?" Julian shot him a look. "I said I was sorry." Eli smirked. "Don't tell me you're actually interested?" Julian didn't answer. He reached for his phone, thumb hovering, as if he could magically find her name with a few taps. Instead, he opened his email, pretending to read. A few hours later, they were seated in the main conference ballroom, surrounded by industry giants, media teams, and rising entrepreneurs. Panel discussions rolled one after the other, with keynotes and breakout sessions filling the agenda. But Julian wasn't paying attention. His eyes kept scanning the crowd. And then he saw her. Across the room, standing by a table draped in white linen, chatting with 2 older gentlemen, was the woman from 2310. Hair down this time, cascading in waves over her shoulder. She wore a cream blazer over a simple dress, minimalist jewelry, and a badge that read Sierra Langston in sharp, clean font. Julian's breath caught. Langston, as in Victor Langston, media mogul, real estate tycoon, and one of the richest men in the Western Hemisphere. Julian had met him once, years ago, in a boardroom where deals were inked with more tension than trust. Sierra Langston. Of course. The name clicked like a puzzle piece. "I'll be damned," he muttered to himself. Eli followed his gaze, eyebrows rising when he saw who Julian was looking at. "Ah," he said. "So now the plot thickens. You know her?" "Everyone knows of her," Eli said, crossing his arms. "She's been in the tabloids since she was 20. Fashion Week in Milan 1 month, UN Charity Gala the next. Dropped out of business school and still manages more PR for her father's empire than half his staff. She's smart, dangerous, and extremely not your type. Julian raised a brow. What makes you say that? Because you're predictable, Eli replied without missing a beat. You like control. Sierra Langston is chaos wrapped in diamonds. Her reputation's earned. She's left at least 3 heirs to billion-dollar companies emotionally wrecked. One joined a monastery. True story. Julian smirked. Sounds exaggerated. Probably, Eli said. But do you want your name added to the list of casualties? Julian didn't answer. He was already moving across the ballroom. Sierra turned just as he approached. There was a flicker of recognition in her eyes. A pause, a split second where she considered whether to walk away. She didn't. Miss Langston, he said smoothly, extending a hand. We didn't get a chance to meet properly last night. I'm Julian Hart. She shook his hand, her grip cool and measured. Oh, I remember you, she said, tilting her head slightly. You're the guy who broke into my room in the middle of the night. There it was, sharp wit, laced with sarcasm. Julian smiled. I promise I'm usually better at reading numbers. Pity, she said, glancing at the name on his badge. I'd expected more from the CEO of Hart Tech. Maybe all those billions have made you soft. I've been accused of worse, he replied. But for what it's worth, I'm really glad it was your room. She raised a brow. Why's that? He met her gaze without flinching. Because if it hadn't been, I might never have met you. Her lips curved, but not into a smile. More like amusement. Or intrigue. Bold. I'm persistent. I'm not impressed. Julian grinned. Challenge accepted. Sierra shook her head slightly, amused in spite of herself. You're impossible. That's what my board says. Before she could respond, someone called her name from across the room. She turned slightly, giving him one last look. Try not to get lost again, Mr. Hart. And with that, she walked away, poised, unreadable, and magnetic. Julian watched her go, hands in his pockets, his grin fading into something more thoughtful. He wasn't just intrigued anymore. He was interested. And he hadn't even scratched the surface. The second day of the summit opened with clear skies and tense smiles. A panel discussion on tech innovation and legacy industries was set to begin, and the room was packed wall to wall. Everyone who was anyone was there. Founders, VCs, legacy heirs, and sharp-eyed journalists itching for stories wrapped in champagne and scandal. Julian Hart sat 2 rows from the stage, pretending to listen. His fingers drummed softly on his knee while his eyes scanned the crowd until they inevitably landed on her again. Sierra Langston, seated effortlessly in the front row like she owned the place. Her blazer was draped over the back of her chair, revealing a sleeveless black dress with a neckline just bold enough to turn heads without losing elegance. Her posture was perfect. Not stiff, commanding. She didn't look around much. She didn't need to. People were already looking at her. She was on her phone, thumb scrolling slowly, expression unreadable. Occasionally, she'd look up, but not at the speaker. She was surveying, measuring. Julian knew the type. She wasn't just sitting pretty. She was calculating the room. The panel ended in a drizzle of applause, and as the crowd shifted to the adjoining lounge for espresso and networking, Julian made his move. She was at the refreshment table, stirring honey into a cup of green tea. You drink tea? He asked from beside her. I would have pegged you for an espresso kind of woman. Sierra didn't look at him at first. You'd be surprised how little you know about me. He smiled. I'd like to fix that. This time, she turned to face him. Her eyes were cool, gray with a hint of frost. Do you always flirt with women you accidentally barge in on? Only when they're as graceful under pressure as you were, he said. Most people would have called security. I still might, she replied flatly, then sipped her tea without breaking eye contact. Julian chuckled. I'm not dangerous, just persistent. She lowered the cup. That's exactly what dangerous people say. A silence stretched between them, not awkward, but thick with the heat of unspoken challenge. Around them, executives chattered, cameras flashed, deals were whispered over tiny sandwiches. But to Julian, the room was fading into background noise. He nodded toward an empty high-top table in the corner. Can I buy you another tea? Or do I need to walk into your room a second time for that opportunity? A flash of something, amusement maybe, crossed her face. But it was gone before it settled. I don't date CEOs, she said, walking past him and taking a seat on a velvet bench near the window. Julian followed anyway. Why not? She looked up, unimpressed. Because they all think they're special. He sat across from her, folding his hands on the table. And we're not. Not to me, she said plainly. You all say the same things, wear the same watches, give the same speeches. You talk about changing the world while flying private jets to luxury summits. Julian leaned in slightly. Do I seem that shallow to you? Sierra tilted her head, as if considering him for the first time. I don't know you. But the fact that you're still sitting here suggests you're either arrogant, bored, or too stubborn to take a hint. He smirked. Is it possible I'm just intrigued? By what? A woman who's not falling all over you. He didn't answer right away. His gaze softened. By a woman who sees through the act. Sierra's expression flickered. Just enough for him to know she hadn't expected that answer. Across the room, Eli watched from a safe distance, sighing into his coffee. He's doing it, he muttered to himself. He's really doing it. Later that evening, Julian stepped into the rooftop cocktail event in a charcoal gray suit, tieless, drink in hand. The city skyline stretched out behind glass walls like a glittering postcard. Laughter echoed off the steel beams and string lights swayed in the warm breeze. Sierra was there again, this time in a deep emerald dress, talking to a finance executive from Berlin. Her laugh was brief, controlled, the kind of laugh that felt more like punctuation than pleasure. Julian approached slowly, waiting until the conversation thinned out before stepping in. Still not impressed? He asked casually. She turned, her eyes scanning him from head to toe. I've seen better suits. Have you seen better men in them? Once. In Paris. He laughed. I think you like me, Sierra Langston. She sipped her drink, eyes unblinking. I think you like thinking that. He stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to challenge her. You're not used to people being real with you, are you? Sierra's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Then, with a slow inhale, she downed the rest of her champagne and set the glass down. You don't know the first thing about me, Julian Hart. Then let me. For the first time that evening, her smile was real, but it wasn't sweet. It was dangerous. I'm not a project, and I'm not a reward, she said. If you're looking for someone to make you feel different, go find a mirror. You won't find salvation in me. Then she walked away, graceful, unapologetic, magnetic. And Julian? He just stood there, drink in hand, watching the Ice Queen disappear into the glittering crowd. Still smiling. Because now he knew he wasn't chasing a fantasy. He was chasing a woman who didn't care who he was, and that was exactly what made her worth chasing. The third day of the summit had the air of polite exhaustion. Attendees shuffled between panels with conference lanyards swaying over designer suits, espresso-fueled optimism masking jet lag and back-to-back negotiations. The novelty of networking had worn thin for most. But for Julian Hart, the novelty was still very much alive, and it had a name. Sierra Langston. He hadn't spoken to her all day. Not for lack of trying. She was elusive, a ghost in heels, appearing for just long enough to be seen, then disappearing behind other magnates and moderators before he could approach. Still, he wasn't the kind of man to chase without a strategy. He waited, watched, learned, and as the day gave way to evening, his chance finally came. The conference had organized a more intimate, networking experience on the hotel's private terrace. It was a faux rustic setup, string lights, standing heaters, wood-paneled bars with overpriced bourbon, and acoustic jazz humming beneath murmured conversations. Sierra was leaning against the railing overlooking the city. Alone. Her hair was loose again, dark curls brushing her shoulders. She wore a simple wine-colored dress, low-backed, elegant. She looked both unreachable and quietly tired. Julian approached with 2 glasses of red wine, deliberately choosing not to interrupt the moment. He stood beside her, offering one silently. She took it without looking at him. Persistent, predictable, he said, sipping his own. I prefer face-to-face rejection. That earned him a faint smile. Then you're in the right place. They stood in silence for a while, watching the traffic far below flicker like a slow river of stars. The air smelled of cedar smoke and night jasmine. You look tired, he said after a moment. I am, she replied, her voice softer now. These things drain me. You don't seem the type to get drained. I don't show it, she corrected. Doesn't mean I don't feel it. Julian looked at her, truly looked, not at the curated exterior, but at the weight behind her words. You don't like being here, do you? Sierra took a long sip of wine before answering. I'm not here for me. Your father? She nodded, eyes still on the skyline. He's in Geneva. Sent me instead. Said it would be good optics. Fresh face of the Langston name. Youth charm, all that PR fluff. Julian hesitated. Do you want it? The business. I want the freedom to choose, she said, a note of defiance creeping into her tone. But every room I walk into, people assume I'm either decoration or bait. I get tired of being underestimated or over-sexualized. Or both, Julian added. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Exactly. He let that sit between them for a moment. I know what it feels like to be seen as something you're not, he said. When I was building Heart Tech, no one took me seriously because I didn't come from money. Now they don't take me seriously because I have too much of it. Sierra glanced at him, for the first time with something like curiosity instead of challenge. Julian went on. I've spent my entire adult life earning respect I should have already had, then defending it once I got it. She stared at him for a long moment. That's the first thing you've said that doesn't sound like a line. It's not, he said simply. They went quiet again, the wind teasing her curls. Julian noticed her shoulders relax a fraction, the tightness in her jaw easing. This wasn't the Sierra Langston everyone whispered about. This wasn't the Ice Queen. This was a woman who had been on guard so long. She didn't know how to stand without armor. Why do you keep chasing me? She asked, not coyly, genuinely. You could have anyone in this place. Easier people. Safer ones. Julian looked at her with unflinching honesty. Because you don't pretend to like me. You don't need anything from me. And every time I talk to you, I forget I'm supposed to be performing. That stopped her. For the first time, Sierra blinked, slowly, like she wasn't quite sure how to respond. Do you ever stop performing? She asked, almost a whisper. Julian shook his head. Not until you. A breath escaped her. A laugh, maybe. Or something close to it. She turned back to the skyline and drained the rest of her glass. Then, without looking at him, she said, I don't do relationships. I don't like being vulnerable. Julian set his glass down on the ledge. Neither do I. But here we are. She turned to face him now. Her eyes weren't cold anymore. They were searching. I'll disappoint you, she said. Then let's be disappointed together. A beat passed. Another. Then she said very quietly, I don't know what to do with someone like you. Julian smiled, stepping just a little closer. Not enough to touch her, but enough to feel the pull between them. Start by not pushing me away. Sierra studied him like he was a book written in a language she was only now learning to read. Then, with no announcement or hesitation, she reached for his tie, loosening it gently like a cymbal. Okay, she said softly. One drink. Just one. He leaned down, voice warm. I'll take it. And as they walked back into the hum of the terrace, the lights behind them twinkling like distant stars, neither of them noticed the subtle shift that had taken place. But something had changed. The ice had begun to melt. The hotel suite was silent, but not asleep. The city beyond the glass walls pulsed with midnight energy, distant sirens, low rumbles of traffic, the occasional laughter of strangers floating upward from the streets below. Inside, the hum of the central air conditioning was the only thing moving, except for the light. Soft and silver, moonlight spilled over the balcony and through the parted curtains of room 2309. Julian stood barefoot on the marble tiles, a glass of scotch in hand, his other resting on the edge of the railing. He wasn't thinking about quarterly earnings or digital ecosystems, or the pile of untouched emails glowing on his tablet. He was thinking about her. Sierra Langston. He hadn't seen her since their quiet exchange on the terrace. No texts. No casual run-ins. Not even an accidental glance during the closing keynote. It had been 2 days. 2 very long days. He wasn't used to the feeling, this tug-of-war inside his chest, half logic, half want. She had said 1 drink. And they'd had it. Then she had walked away like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. A soft knock broke the stillness. Julian turned, confused. He wasn't expecting anyone. It was past midnight. He hesitated for a moment, then walked toward the door and opened it. There she was, standing barefoot in the hallway, wearing navy satin pajama pants and a thin gray tank top, her hair loose, lips parted as if she'd almost turned back before knocking. No makeup. No mask. Just Sierra, raw and real. "I couldn't sleep," she said. Julian stepped aside without a word. She entered quietly, eyes flicking across the space like she was trying to convince herself it was okay to be here. He closed the door behind her. Neither spoke. She walked toward the balcony, mimicking his earlier stance, hands on the railing, shoulders rising and falling with a sigh that sounded like surrender. He watched her for a long moment before joining her. "I thought you disappeared," he said finally. "I did," she murmured. "I tend to." Julian didn't press. He just waited. After a pause, she said, "You ever feel like the person everyone thinks you are isn't really you?" "All the time." She turned her face toward him. "Then why don't you correct them?" He met her eyes. "Because sometimes it's easier to play the role than disappoint everyone with the truth." Sierra looked away again. "My father used to say vulnerability was a weakness. That people would use it as leverage. That the moment they saw the real you, they'd either pity you, hate you, or walk away." Julian didn't say anything. Just listened. "I believed him," she continued, voice low. "So I became what he needed me to be. Cold. Calculated. Unapologetic. I stopped letting people in. Stopped letting anyone close enough to hurt me." She glanced down at her hands, gripping the metal railing. And for the most part, it worked. There was a silence thick with everything she wasn't saying. Then, "But lately I've started wondering." She paused, her voice cracking just slightly. "If I've built a fortress I can't get out of." Julian took a step closer. Close enough to feel her warmth. Close enough to break the rules they were both pretending to still follow. He reached out and gently took her hand off the railing. "You can," he said. "One door at a time." Sierra stared at their hands. Her fingers didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. "Do you want to know the real reason I came here tonight?" she asked. "Yes." She looked up at him. Her eyes, usually steel and sharp, were soft. No shields, no distance. "Because when I'm with you," her voice faltered, "I don't feel like I have to win. Or perform. Or be anything other than just me." Julian swallowed hard. The air between them felt electric, fragile. "And that terrifies me," she finished. He brought her hand to his lips, kissed the back of it. Not seductively, not playfully. Gently. Reverently. "I'm scared too," he admitted. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She just looked at him like she was seeing him, truly seeing him, for the first time. Then slowly, tentatively, she stepped forward and placed her head on his chest. Julian wrapped his arms around her without hesitation. For a while they just stood there. Not as a billionaire and a mogul's daughter. Not as 2 people playing games at a summit designed for appearances. But as 2 complicated souls, letting their guards down, just enough. After some time she whispered, "Can I stay?" He didn't answer with words. He took her hand again, led her away from the balcony, and pulled back the covers of the bed. She climbed in, curling on one side without ceremony. He joined her, leaving space between them. Not because he wanted to, but because he respected what this moment meant. She reached for his hand in the dark. He held it, and that was enough. No kisses. No touches. Just shared silence. And the sound of 2 people learning how to let go. Together. The morning sun poured into the suite with the sharp precision of a blade. Julian Hart was already awake, lying on his back, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Sierra was still asleep beside him, curled up in a soft cocoon of white sheets and silence, her breathing slow and even. They hadn't touched beyond holding hands. But somehow, last night had felt more intimate than anything he'd experienced in years. He turned his head to look at her, messy hair splayed across the pillow, the faintest frown on her brow, as if even in sleep she was bracing for something. She looked like a woman used to waking up alone. Julian wanted to change that. Wanted to be the exception in a world where men came and went, but never stayed. But just as the thought crossed his mind, his phone vibrated on the nightstand. A low buzz persistent. He reached for it, careful not to wake her. 7:12 a.m. One new message, Eli. Eli, you need to see this. Now. His gut twisted. He slipped out of bed quietly, grabbed his robe, and stepped into the living room. The link was already waiting. Julian clicked it. Breaking, Julian Hart and Sierra Langston. Romance brewing behind closed doors at Global Summit? Below the headline was a grainy image, clearly zoomed in from a great distance. Julian and Sierra on the balcony 2 nights ago, standing close, her hand on his chest, his lips brushing her knuckles. Another image followed, them leaving the terrace together. No kiss, no scandalous contact. But enough. The headline didn't need evidence. It had implication. Suggestion. Context didn't matter. A low heat rose in Julian's chest, not shame but anger. Someone had been watching. Someone had waited for the right moment. And someone had released it with purpose. He scrolled down. More pictures. Then a block of text. Sources inside the event claim the Heart Tech founder has been spotted on multiple occasions in close proximity to Victor Langston's daughter. Speculation is already circulating about whether this budding relationship is personal or part of a strategic alliance ahead of the rumored Langston-Hart merger. He stopped reading. Julian let the phone fall to the couch and rubbed a hand over his face. This wasn't just a cheap story. It was a move. And he knew exactly who would make it. By the time Sierra stirred awake, Julian had already dressed and ordered coffee. She padded out of the bedroom wearing one of his crisp white dress shirts, unbuttoned just enough to remind him of how unguarded she had been the night before. But her eyes changed the second she saw his face. What happened? He handed her the phone. She read in silence. Twice. Her grip tightened. Her jaw set. Is this a joke? She asked, tone flat. Controlled. Too controlled. No. Did you? Her voice cracked, not with emotion but disbelief. Did you leak this? Julian's mouth dropped open. What? No. Sierra, come on. You don't think it's convenient timing? She snapped, throwing the phone onto the couch. This rumor just happens to break days before my father finalizes the merger talks? You just happen to be the rising tech king who gets close to the only Langston with a seat at the table. Julian stepped toward her, voice firm but calm. If I wanted to use you, I wouldn't have waited until we were holding hands under a blanket in silence. You know that. She didn't look convinced. Her hands were shaking now, but she crossed her arms to hide it. Her armor was snapping back into place, fast and unforgiving. I don't know anything anymore, she whispered. Julian paused. You think I'm the kind of man who would fake what we felt last night for a business edge? Her silence was answer enough. He backed up a step, nodded. Wow. I have to protect my family, she said, voice colder now. If this becomes a headline war, it's not just about me. It's my father's name, his empire. And mine doesn't matter? Julian snapped. You think I want this kind of attention? You think I like seeing my name dragged into a tabloid, just because Because you what? She said, eyes locked on his now. Julian hesitated. Because I care about you. Silence. No clever reply. No smirk. No sarcastic jab. Sierra looked down, her expression unreadable. Then, I need space. He laughed once, quietly, not mockingly, just sad. Of course you do, he said. That's what you do, right? You run. I protect myself. Julian stared at her a moment longer, then nodded. I hope that's working for you. He left before she could answer. The rest of the day was a blur of calls, meetings, and damage control. Eli had already pulled the press release logs from Heart Tech's PR team. Nothing was leaked from inside. In fact, the source of the photos had been traced back to an anonymous account tied to a media firm owned, indirectly, by one of Julian's competitors. Victor Langston's longtime rival in legacy media. It was a hit piece, pure and simple, designed to embarrass both families, to paint Sierra as impulsive, to paint Julian as predatory, and to tank the possibility of a merger before it had legs. Eli sat across from him in the private suite, watching him quietly as Julian processed the report. "You could release this," Eli said finally. "Clear your name. Expose the other party. Make it public." Julian stared at the laptop screen. "And drag her down with me?" Eli didn't reply. Julian shook his head. "No. If she thinks I did it, then me clearing myself doesn't mean anything. So you're just letting her go?" Julian looked out the window. "She asked for space. I'm giving it to her." Hours later, as the summit began winding down, Sierra stood alone in the hotel garden, phone clutched in one hand. She had spent the entire day fending off calls from her father's advisors, family friends, media outlets. Damage control. Clarifications. Carefully worded denials. But what kept looping in her mind wasn't the story. It was his face. When she had asked if he leaked it. The hurt in his eyes. The disappointment. And the fact that deep down, she hadn't really believed he'd done it. Not for 1 second. He could have outed the source. Could have spun the narrative in his favor. But he didn't. He let her walk away. And that said more than 1,000 headlines ever could. The last day of the summit unfolded with ceremonial predictability. Closing speeches, sponsor acknowledgements, champagne toasts, and firm handshakes between people who would forget each other's names by the following Tuesday. Julian Hart stood alone near the exit doors of the grand ballroom, one hand in his pocket, the other nursing a glass of water he hadn't sipped. He looked like he belonged there, tailored suit, casual confidence, but his focus wasn't on the stage or the networking crowd or the congratulatory back-patting happening all around him. He was watching the entrance. Waiting. Not hoping, just waiting. For a woman who might not come. For a conversation that might never happen. And still he stayed. Across the hotel, Sierra Langston stood in front of a floor-length mirror in her suite, motionless. Her black heels sat next to the door. Her lipstick was untouched on the bathroom counter. Her phone was on the bed, buzzing again with another text from her father. "Board needs assurance." "No more surprises, Sierra." She didn't answer. She stared at her reflection, not at the outfit or the flawless makeup or the name tag with Langston printed in gold foil. She was looking through it, through the polished exterior. All week, she'd been fighting a war between instinct and emotion. Her entire life, she had been taught to be unshakable. And yet, Julian Hart had shaken her. Not with charm, not with power, but with patience. With silence when he could have shouted. With restraint when he could have defended himself. With vulnerability when she was ready to armor up and run. She had accused him, doubted him, hurt him, and he had still let her choose. No pressure, no manipulation, just a look in his eyes that said, "I see you. I want you, even if you don't want me back." Sierra picked up her phone, scrolled to his name. She didn't text. She didn't call. She moved. Back in the ballroom, Julian had just begun to walk away when the crowd shifted, parted like instinct, and there she was, standing in the doorway, wearing a long cream coat over a dark emerald dress, her hair swept to one side, heels clicking as she stepped forward. People noticed. Whispers started. Heads turned. Phones came out. But Sierra didn't look at any of them. She looked only at him. Julian stopped walking. His breath caught, just for a second. The hurt was still there, somewhere behind his eyes, but so was the pull, the kind that doesn't fade with logic. Sierra stepped up to him, close enough to smell the citrus note of his cologne. "I was wrong," she said, voice clear even. "I didn't ask for an apology." "I'm not giving one because you asked for it," she replied. "I'm giving it because I should have known. Because I did know. And I chose fear anyway." Julian searched her eyes. "What changed?" She smiled, but it wasn't performative. It was honest, quiet, real. You didn't fight to prove yourself, she said. You just stood still and let me see the difference between who I feared and who you are. The room had gone strangely silent around them. Julian glanced once at the people watching, then back to her. You sure about this? He asked gently. I'm not sure about anything, she said, stepping even closer. But I'm done pretending I don't feel what I feel. And then, in front of an entire room of executives, investors, and media, in front of 1,000 carefully built reputations, Sierra Langston reached up, took Julian's face in both hands, and kissed him. Not a dramatic movie kiss. Just a kiss full of truth. Simple, certain, undeniable. Julian kissed her back like the moment didn't scare him, like he'd been waiting not for the kiss, but for her. The kind of kiss that closes a chapter, but opens something bigger. When they pulled apart, people clapped. Some laughed in surprise. Others whispered in disbelief. Sierra didn't care. Julian didn't blink. They just looked at each other like the noise didn't matter. Because it didn't. Later that evening, as the summit crowd dispersed and luxury cars lined the valet entrance, Eli walked beside Julian and Sierra as they exited the hotel. Julian's hand was in hers casually. Eli arched a brow. So, this is happening now? Sierra smirked. Jealous? Terrified, Eli deadpanned. But I'll adjust. Julian squeezed her hand, then turned to Eli. Book 2 tickets to Paris. No press. No meetings. Just off-grid. Eli looked at Sierra. He always makes impulsive decisions after major events. Usually it's a yacht. She grinned. I'm way more dangerous than a yacht. Julian laughed. Exactly why I'm taking the risk. As their car pulled up, Julian opened the door for her. Sierra paused before getting in, looking around at the hotel. The scene of the chaos, the confusion, the confrontation, and the connection. She turned to him one last time before stepping in. This wasn't supposed to happen. Julian leaned in, whispered, but it did. And then, with the flash of tail lights and the hush of closing doors, they drove off. Not as the people they had pretended to be, but as the couple no one expected. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.